الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. في البداية حقيقة نرحب حقيقة بجميع الحضور في هذه الندوة حقيقة الثقافية الإثرائية المعرفية العلمية. حقيقة سعدنا بكوكبة من النجوم والناس المتألقين حقيقة في المجال الرياضي، ونتمنى إن شاء الله أن يكون لنا دور نستكمل هذا الإثراء المعرفي والإثراء الثقافي لمجتمعاتنا العربية بشكل عام. حقيقة أتشرف حقيقة بإدارة هذه الجلسة، ومن هذا المنبر حقيقة أتقدم بخاص الشكر والتقدير إلى حقيقة مقام خادم محمد الشريفين وحكومة المملكة على هذا الرعاية المهمة حقيقة لمثل الجلسات والندوات المهمة، ولسمو ولي العهد، وأيضا للشغوف بالرياضة دائما صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير عبد العزيز بن تركي الفيصل. وهذا حقيقة من أجمل الأوصاف أن يكون عندنا وزير رياضة شغوف بالرياضة حقيقة. أيضا حقيقة أشكر حقيقة جميع القائمين في اللجنة الأولمبية، صاحب السمو الأمير فهد بن جلوي والأستاذ عبد العزيز العنتزي الذي يقوم بجهود حقيقة، ويقومان كلاهما بجهود حقيقة رائعة في اللجنة الأولمبية. نشكر الإخوان أيضا في اتحاد الثقافة الرياضية على ما أولوه من اهتمام حقيقة، رغم أن الاتحاد وليد ولكن أولوه اهتمام كبير حقيقة في تثقيف المجتمع، وأعطاهم حقيقة مساحة كبيرة لأن تكون حقيقة الممارسة الرياضية يتبعها أو خلينا نقول في نفس الخط يسير معها ثقافة رياضية. أتمنى فقط تسمحوا لي أيضا أني أشكر وأقدم أيضا المتحدثين والنجوم في هذه الجلسة، وفاسمحوا لي أن أقدمهم باللغة الإنجليزية وأيضا اللغة العربية، أيضا بعض منهم متحدث باللغتين وبعض منهم ما شاء الله عنده أكثر من لغة. ففي البداية أحب أرحب في جاكوب الأمين العام لجمعية الرياضة والثقافة الدولية. I want to welcome you, Jacob, for this session as a Secretary General of International Sport and Culture Association. Thank you to be with us, and we really interested to hear from you and to add a value for our guest, and as well to give us a lot of experience. As I can see in your CVs, there's a lot of experience. We want to hear about it, and you lead in a lot of projects, and you have a great experience, more than 14 years in this association, and as well you've done a lot of projects in terms of the grassroots in sport, and as well in the grassroots in sport, and as well you've been part of a lot of projects in Denmark, and as well in a couple of like a North Youth Association, and this is really great experience, and I'm really interested to hear this experience and to share it with our audience, and we are really interested to hear from you. Just let me to explain or give the guest some of your experience in Arabic, and after that we can start. Can you hear me well?
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, great. مستر جوبس هو الأمين العام لجمعية الرياضة والثقافة الرياضية، لديه خبرة تجاوزت أكثر من 14 عام في الجمعية. ساهم في تنفيذ أكثر من 20 مشروع دولي تهتم بالناشئين والمدربين والناس اللي في الجراس رود أو في المراحل الناشئة. ساهم في تطوير العديد من البرامج والمعسكرات اللي تهتم بالتربية البدنية وأيضا النشاط البدني، مثل برنامج Now We Move الآن نتحرك. عاملة في وزارة الثقافة الدنماركية وجمعية شباب الشمال، وأيضا ساهم في تطوير العديد من البرامج في الدبلوماسية الرياضية وبناء القدرات والديمقراطية والقيادة. فلديه ما شاء الله خبرة كبيرة، وإحنا حقيقة مهتمين نستمع منه حقيقة لما لديه من خبرات وتجارب حقيقة دولية وعالمية. نشكر حقيقة على أنه معنا اليوم ونعطيه المجال. Floor is yours, Jobs. Please give us your experience. People are interested to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm very happy to share some insights from our side. Hopefully this can be of use and of value. So I'll try to share my screen so you can follow my presentation. Obviously, I have not had the chance to understand everything that was said today, so I hope this can be supplementary and complementary to what was already discussed. I would like to start with a couple of reflections about the sports sector. I think what is being happening in many parts of the world is we look at the uniformity of the professional or elite sports sector. This is something we can call the pyramid of sport, where we recognize federations, specific sport activities and their regulation. That's typically the same all over the world. But I would like to point to a broader aspect of sport and physical activity, so that not only competitive sport, but also participation sport and regular physical activity is being considered in the context of sporting cultures. In fact, I think that when we talk about regular physical activity, ordinary daily sport activities, this is where we see the diversity all over the world from very different countries. And that diversity, I think, is a strength, something that in fact allows us to develop more sustainable solutions in the future. So indeed, if we talk about sustainable development and the sustainable development goals, how may we look at sport and sport culture towards those objectives? I would like to introduce here the concept of physical literacy. This is something that we in ISCA have been looking at very closely for some years now. In fact, we've published several resources about physical literacy, which is really a fundamental approach to saying, how do we as humans learn to and continue to move? And physical literacy is a good way of saying that not only do humans need to be literate in the sense of learning to read and write, or they need to have numeral literacy so they can calculate and count. We also need to have physical literacy, an ability to continue moving and learning and interaction with other humans throughout our lives. And so I would like to suggest to the audience to consider looking at the website about physical literacy to understand how this concept can be valuable also in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. And therefore, I think it's important that we look at the whole sport ecosystem. Here we have different elements to it. Of course, there is the individual or personal level and the local community level, but we should also think about the organizational and systems levels as well. And here I think our organization, International Sport and Culture Association, has a specific role to play when it comes to increasing participation, getting more people to be active. This is not only about professional sports, performance sports, but actually about everyday activity for ordinary citizens. And I think here we have a major contribution to make by getting individuals active and therefore contributing also to the global sustainable goals. In fact, I think the key component that maybe the grassroots sports sector can contribute is about behavior change. So what can we do to make individuals do something differently tomorrow than they did yesterday? In other words, are there ways that we can use everyday physical activity, everyday sport to make more healthy choices, more sustainable choices, and something that helps the planet well-being as well? And here I think it's important to think about sustainable development and specifically about climate challenges that we see around the world today. And we have to be honest, and this is not something we can solve in this generation. It is something we hand over to our children, the next generations, in fact, to restore the planet well-being, to restore climate ecosystems, etc. And I think we need to combine that with another aspect. And this, I think, is where grassroots sport and what we can call personal well-being, so being physically active together with other citizens and your peers, is a way of interacting with your environment and also making conscious and sustainable choices. So we would like to suggest that thinking about the planet well-being can and should be combined also with how we interact on an everyday basis. In fact, how we move, how we are physically active, and how we engage in sport. So here are obviously the well-known sustainable development goals. And I think when we talk about sport and sport cultures and their contribution to sustainable development, we should be very specific. We shouldn't say that it contributes to everything. We should try to say specifically which goal or even which sub-goal does my activity contribute to. And here I would like to suggest and highlight some of the sustainable development goals that I believe grassroots sport specifically can contribute to. And I think it would be well known that health and well-being is an obvious example, but it's also important to understand that there's a learning aspect to sport. So quality education is relevant in this context. Certainly there's an inclusion and gender equality perspective to sport and physical activity. We also know that the sports sector has a huge economic potential, so it does contribute also to employment. It contributes to economic growth, and we know that there is a chance to get less involved groups, less active groups, more included, and therefore we can use sport also to reduce inequalities. And what's important to understand is also that sustainable cities and communities really come about through individual and citizen action. And so if grassroots sport means that people are doing something on an everyday basis, I think there's obviously a contribution to make from grassroots sport, from physical activity to this sustainable development goal. And we want to make sure we do and deliver grassroots sport activities in a responsible way, being conscious about our consumption, understanding also how that may affect or even contribute to positive climate action. So I think there is a good contribution to make here as well. And finally, sport organizations and the whole ecosystem of support structures around grassroots sport certainly should be part of sustainable and strong institutions as well. So yes, there is a contribution to make. I think we should have the conversation about how does that happen in practice. And here I've highlighted some of those examples. So more specifically in ISCA, we are now developing what we call the MOVE for sustainable development. And I would like to just point to some interesting aspects of that that hopefully can inspire the conversation at today's symposium. So the first one is that we really have a possibility with grassroots sport to say that we can drive behavior change. There's access to individual and the decisions they make through grassroots sport. And that I think is a major strength. It's also very positive if we take the concept of physical literacy to see that in fact, if your actions that you want to do every day through being physically active, through being engaged in grassroots sport also contribute to planet well-being, the climate and broader sustainable development goals, if those two things interact and make sense, then it's probably easier to make a difference rather than pointing fingers and blaming and assigning guilt to individuals. So let's combine the individual well-being, the grassroots sport perspective with sustainable actions for the whole society. My third point is that the sport community indeed is the biggest online community in the world. This is quoting the World Federation of the Sporting Goods Industry. So obviously there is also a reach to citizens through online media, and I think there's something to exploit here. I also think it's important that we look at sustainable development if we want the sports sector to be relevant, to be attractive to the younger generations. They certainly are. This is what research is showing, very, very keen to see how any action will contribute to sustainable development. And finally, again, the point needs to be made that if we can combine individual actions, individual personal well-being and community sport activities with something that is sustainable, longer term and relevant in the context of higher goals, I think we have a better chance to making a relevant contribution. And I think looking at the sector of grassroots sport, physical activity and recreation more broadly, we really have an important contribution to make. So I hope this is something that can be of inspiration, of relevance, I'm more than happy to have the conversation, answer any questions you may have. And I'm also happy to have my contact details shared so we can have dialogue in the days and weeks to come. But thank you very much for listening. I'm looking forward to any questions or any comments you may have to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for you. It's really interested and as well a lot of knowledge and information. Thank you very much for that. Let me just to translate for the audience couple of points you crossing. في البداية حقيقة نتكلم عن قطاع الرياضة، وتكلم عن القطاع يحوي الاتحادات، الأنظمة، الأنشطة الرياضية وما يخلفها وما يكون ضمنها من أنشطة، وأيضا نشاط ثقافي الإنسان بشكل دوري يمارس الرياضة ويشارك فيها، واليوم الناس حتى تشارك كثير من أنشطتها. أيضا تحدث عن الاستدامة في التطوير ودورها في استمرارية في تحقيق الأهداف، وهذه أيضا كانت نقطة مهمة جدا وأعطاها مساحة كبيرة حقيقة أثناء الاستعراض. وتكلم أيضا عن أن البشرية بشكل عام ليست فقط تعمل والتعلم، وإنما تحتاج الاستدامة والاستمرارية في النشاط لتحقيق الأهداف والحركة. أيضا استعرض نظام الرياضة الإيكو سيستم بشكل عام وتكلم بشكل نظرة عامة عنه وما يحويه وعناصره. أيضا أعطانا حقيقة نظرة مهمة وجوهرية حقيقة عن الأمور الاجتماعية اللي تحدث داخل هذا النظام الاجتماعي، وأنها ليست فقط عملية رياضية للمحترفين، وإنما الرياضة تكون على مستويات مختلفة منها مستويات الناشئين، وأيضا تساهم بشكل عام في تغيير السلوك والتصرفات وتطور بشكل عام في الأجيال القادمة. أيضا أعطى مساحة للرفاهية والمشاركة مع الآخرين في البيئة المحيطة، وأيضا على مستوى كوكبنا والتفكير في الكوكب وكيف ممكن يأثر بشكل عام في البيئة والكوكب، وأن عملية الحركة وأن نكون نشيطين من الأمور الأساسية. Thank you very much for all the knowledge, and we're going to leave the question and any comment at the end of the session, because just we want to have more speaker and to save your times. Okay.